Hello authors, I'm Joanne Morrell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short nonfiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. Hello, authors! I hope you're all keeping well in whatever part of the world you reside and listen to the podcast in. Today's interview is with Helen Scheuerer on how to write a successful series. Helen is the author of the bestselling trilogies, the Orameer Chronicles and the Curse of the Cyren Queen quartet. She's sharing some insights from her new debut non-fiction book, How to Write a Successful Series, about the real reasons authors should write in a series, some of the common mistakes authors make when writing series, and her tips for authors looking to get started writing in a series. So in my author adventure this week, it's school holidays. They're in full swing, which means a lot of family time and not a lot of author time. So we've been doing lots of fun activities, gone to the Royal Show, swimming. Kids have had their friends over for playdates and sleepovers, and we're off to the circus this evening. So it's been a whole lot of fun. I also haven't taken any time off my part-time day job. So I'm lucky my kids are at an age where they can see to themselves. So I have a bit of leeway in the school holidays, more so than I'm used to be able to get on with some things. What is happening in my author adventure is the horror feature script, which I think is going to have a bit of a psychological twist. Started making notes, and I've also looked at the date of the competition I want to put it in for at the end of October, and I've got the dates that I need to start writing by. I tried to book into the Catherine Susanna Prickard Writers' Centre for 2 nights at the end of October to pump out the first draft of the script, but they're completely booked out, so October's usually a busy month. If you haven't heard of KSP, they're a writing centre up in the hills in Perth. Beautiful little wood cabins they've got, and you can book there and go and get some writing done, and it's really great. In October they've got spooky story sundowner events, and it would have been a perfect setting for me to be able to start writing a horror script. Cabin in secluded area to write. I'm now looking at accommodation in the setting I have set the script, which is local to me, and I just would like to have a day or 2 days undisturbed to just be able to pump out the first draft. If you listen to episode 32 of the podcast with Tammy Gross, and she's the scriptpreneur over in Florida, and I'm going to be buying her book, F Your Script. She pumped out her script in a couple of days in a horror setting in, I think it was Stephen King's, one of these horror haunted houses things from his books. So I kind of had the same idea as her, as maybe doing it that way and just getting it out. So we'll see how that goes. Besides the horror feature, I have started, and I'm in mostly a state of organisation in my house, in my workflow, in my head, and this is to help my own workflow a bit better, and it's also research for a non-fiction book idea I had last year, which I hope to hopefully be able to work on and release next year. Regular listeners of the podcast know by now that I have a lot of ideas in a lot of areas, and they're not necessarily new ideas. The thing that I've noticed is I tend to have an idea, and then it's probably I'll write a few things out about it, and then it's maybe the following year that I actually start work on it, maybe even the year after that it emerges. So it is a long process, but when you start to notice your processes, it's quite interesting. Hence why being a hybrid author suits my personality. So if you love the podcast or any of the episodes has helped you further in your author career, you can now pay it forward by buying me a coffee over at www.buymeacoffee.com/thehybridauthor. And that's capital T, all capitals, hybrid, capital A, author. Links are in the social media pages and on my website and on the posts and on this podcast post as well. Or you can leave me a review on whatever platform you listen to the podcast on. This is to help other writers like you discover the podcast. So let's all support each other. That's enough about me. Let's crack on with the episode.
Helen Scheuerer is the fantasy author of the best-selling trilogy, The Orameer Chronicles and The Curse of the Cyren Queen quartet. Her work has been highly praised for its strong, flawed female characters and its action-packed plots. Recently, she has also delved into publishing advice for authors with her debut nonfiction book, How to Write a Successful Series. Helen has a Bachelor of Creative Writing at the University of Wollongong and a Master's of Publishing at the University of Sydney. She has been a full-time author since 2018 and now lives amidst the mountains in central Otago, New Zealand, where she's constantly dreaming up new stories. Absolutely beautiful bio, Helen. Welcome to the Hybrid Author Podcast.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. Such a career you've had already, and we want to delve deeper into your publishing and author adventure to date. But please tell us, how did you come to join the industry and, effectively write in series?
So I've always wanted to be a writer. I've written stories since I was a little kid. I guess in terms of writing in a series, I sort of fell into it quite naturally because I was writing fantasy, and that tends to be sort of a symptom of the genre in a way. But also, I guess all the fantasy books I was reading at the time were part of a series. So in talking about series, I came to understand just how powerful the form is for an author's career. Not to mention, I just love them. I love how addictive they are. I love reading them and watching them. It's just such a great form of escapism and entertainment, really. So basically, over the years, that sort of love evolved into a career, essentially. My first book, Heart of Mist, came out in 2017, which was the first book in my Orameer Chronicles trilogy. And yeah, I became a full-time author shortly after that. And my ebooks and print books, they're indie published, but all my audiobooks are traditionally published. So I've definitely got that hybrid thing going on as well.
Wow, yeah, that's really different. How did that come about?
Well, I think after Heart of Mist came out, I mean, it's a long time ago now, but Heart of Mist came out and it did much better than I anticipated. And essentially, it became a bestseller. It became this book that allowed me to write full time off the back of one book, which is pretty uncommon. And I suppose it sort of caught the attention of an agent, and a couple of audiobook publishers approached me. So I said yes to the agent and yes to the best audiobook deal, and it sort of snowballed from there. So yeah, since then, all my audiobooks have been traditionally published, and the agent represents me for foreign translation rights and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. So the publishers that for the audio is your agent? They've approached you. Is it the agent that's kind of gone out to get them, and it's only audio format you were looking for to be hybrid?
It's sort of changed over the years. So with Heart of Mist, I had a couple of audiobook publishers come to me, and an agent came to me at about the same time. The agent wanting to represent me, the audiobook people wanting to offer deals. And so I took the agent on to then broker the deal between me and the audiobook publishers that had approached. I think there were about 3 that wanted the Orameer Chronicles. And then as my career's gone on, I've kept the same agent, and whenever I have a new book, essentially I say to her, okay, I've got a new book, I've got a new series, can you please shop it around for me? And so far that's worked out pretty well.
Right. So your other series, do you indie publish that as well, or are you going down the traditional route for like your ebooks and print?
No,
also?
so all my ebooks, paperbacks, hardcovers, they're all independently published. And so it's just the audiobooks that are traditionally published. And that's across both series, the same for both of them.
Was that something, I guess, that how come you went to do the indie route first rather than going down the traditional, or did you try the trad route first? Or
with having done a creative writing degree, you're sort of pushed towards doing traditional publishing. That degree never really talks about indie publishing as a viable option. So originally I was writing literary fiction, which is obviously very different to young adult epic fantasy. I had a contract with a small press, so I was planning on going traditional for the literary fiction. And the process was very long-winded, and it eventually, the rights got reverted back to me. And that was just as I had started writing Heart of Mist. I had also done the Masters of Publishing as well. And that sort of gave me a much deeper understanding of all the different sort of elements of publishing, like the production, the editing, the marketing, all of the stuff, like all the different departments. And I guess I sort of made the decision that with the fantasy books, I wanted to go indie. I didn't try to get them traditionally published. I actually had interest from a traditional publisher for Heart of Mist because I'd been blogging about the process of just writing it. And in the end, I just decided that indie was better for me because I had that creative control. I had the control over the production schedule. And I also really enjoyed the business side of it. And, you know, things like doing the covers, doing the layout. You've got a lot more control as to how the book's perceived, where it's positioned, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was a choice from the beginning to go indie with the fantasy fiction.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And yeah, I'm very interested in your publishing degree. I think that sounds incredible. So obviously, yep, using the skills you've got and just putting it out there, and it's very worked for you well. The series looks fantastic, so well done.
Thank you.
But today's topic is on your new nonfiction release, How to Write a Successful Series. And we're all very excited about that. So can you tell us what authors can expect from this book when they pick up a copy?
Yeah, sure. So basically, it's about using the series form in order to hook readers for life and set authors up for long-term success. And essentially, it covers a lot of my own personal experiences in writing the 2 series that I've got out now. That's covered about half a decade of my life putting those series out. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of mistakes made, lessons learned, particularly at the beginning stage of the career when you're first sort of ironing out a lot of these kinks in your own processes and still learning the craft and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a book that's very open and honest about the challenges and the mistakes that I've faced and made over the last couple of years. But I suppose at its core, it's about how to write addictive best-selling series that are part of a broader strategy for long-term success. And I always sort of come back to that long-term success. Everything with me is about the long game, and How to Write a Successful Series is a book that it kind of keeps that in mind even when you're at the real beginning of planning and writing a series. It's not just what that series is going to be, but what can your next one be? How can you bake marketing into the book itself? Yeah, just essentially set yourself up for long-term success as an author.
And I think that's, great advice there. And it's quite heard across the board in the writing world, isn't it? That, writers and authorship and stuff, it is a long game because effectively for some people, writing a work can take quite a long time. And then obviously, depending on which publishing route they go with, trad takes a long time. And then for some people, it takes quite a long time to build up an audience with indie. But yeah, I think what I love about the idea of writing in a series, and like you said, is hooking a bunch of readers and then dragging them on, effectively all through your books as well along the series. And I think that's fantastic. You also not just obviously do authorship. I saw on your website you offer manuscript assessment and there's other stuff that you offer. Is that right?
Yeah. I do just a little bit on the side because I get a lot of people sort of popping into my inbox and messages on Instagram asking for help. So I find it's best to have a place to direct people. So I do every now and then I'll do some manuscript assessments and coaching and stuff like that. And it's mainly, I would say the coaching anyway is more so for indie authors, but I mean manuscript assessment could be either trad or indie. But yeah, it is about setting yourself up for long-term success. Pretty much everything I do has that sort of undertone to it, I think.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the people that approach you, are they the authors writing in series or it's all varied?
It's pretty varied, yeah. And it's different genres, different goals, all sorts, yeah.
Yeah. Well, in writing, obviously, people talk, or editors as well, they pick up on a lot of mistakes that authors write, and there's quite common ones all the time. Have you found from your, obviously, manuscript assessment and coaching authors, what are some of the mistakes you've seen or authors to make when writing series?
Yeah, when writing a series, and I mean, this is one I've been guilty of with my first series, is that I didn't keep a series Bible. And that's not something, it's not this hard and fast rule that everybody has to do it. But I think if you're serious about writing in a series and then also potentially writing multiple series, say in the same literary universe, I think having a series Bible is a lifesaver. And I really wish that for my first series, I had done that. It would have saved me a lot of heartache, a lot of hassle. And even now, you know, looking to the future of my career, one of the things I'd like to consider a long way in the future, but at some point, is doing a series that potentially brings together elements of all the series I've done before, because they're all set in the same literary universe. And of course, without a series Bible, that means that I'm going to have to go back and read the entire series and create a series Bible from scratch.
Yeah, or you're relying on your memory or just making it up, I suppose.
No, and my memory is absolutely terrible. So no.
Have you got kids?
No.
All right.
No, I have not. I'm just naturally terrible at remembering things. But yeah, so I'd say not having a series Bible just is a mistake, in that having one makes life so much easier. And, you know, there are so many challenging aspects of being an author that why wouldn't you do something that makes life a little easier further down the road? That's definitely one. I think another one is, especially with newer authors, the sort of instinct to put all your amazing ideas into the first book or the first series. I think we get a bit overexcited and carried away with our creativity at times and don't necessarily think a few steps ahead. And, you know, all of those ideas probably aren't suited to one book or one series. And you can probably batch them together in, you know, tropes or what your genre demands, blah, 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 and, you know, save some for later. Because if you are trying to write a successful series, chances are you're going to write more than one. Chances are you're trying to make a career out of this. So you don't need to use every single idea in that first book or that first series.
So pacing's quite a big thing, you think?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. I mean, writing series, I've got to say, do you have to be somebody who plots a lot to be able to do that?
No, not at all. So it's funny you should ask that, because I've actually got in the nonfiction book, How to Write a Successful Series, there's 2 chapters. One is for discovery writers or pantsers, and the other one is for outliners. And I'm an outliner myself. And one of the things I really struggled to wrap my head around is perspective of a discovery writer. Like, how do you write a series and not know what's coming? That, to me, I couldn't wrap my head around that. So in order to research and write this book, I went out and I talked to some discovery writers and sort of picked their brains about their processes. There's so many successful series authors who don't outline at all. And there's different methods and things that they do to combat any sort of fears that I think come naturally to an outliner like me. So for me, I fear the fact that I don't know what's going to happen. I might write myself into a plot hole. And I sort of posed that question to some of the authors that I interviewed, and they had a range of different things that they did to avoid that. One of the ones that I really liked was they sort of kept a wall of post-it notes as they wrote. And as they wrote, they would write like a scene point and put it on the wall. So they then sort of had this map, this working map in real time of everything that was happening that they could then use as a reference point to make sure that they weren't in the wrong place in the book, or that they hadn't written themselves into a corner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really clever.
Yeah, I thought so too.
And is it like I've seen as well, some authors too, like they use the colored post-it notes for, I guess, different emotions or different characters or things that's happening, and they have that going. So if there's less of one color somewhere, they need to add more of that person in each scene. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, definitely. I actually use that to a certain degree with my own outlining, in that if I'm trying to weave a particular subplot through, say like a romantic subplot, and I'll color code it throughout the outline so I know when it's sort of tapering off or when the pacing's not quite right. And that's actually a really helpful way to look at it, sort of from a bird's eye point of view.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I guess, do you find writing series, is it the same across all genres, do you believe? You've got, say certain genres like tropes and things, readers would expect to find these tropes in certain genres like women's fiction or romance, and I guess the things that they deal with. In writing series, I suppose I'm asking, for children or adults, the same kind of methods apply, I suppose? I guess it's just a style of writing.
Yeah, I think every author's different, but I think you've brought up an interesting topic in tropes and market and genre, because one of the big things I talk about in this book is the first thing I think you need to do before you put pen to paper with a series is understand your genre. And that means reading in your genre, and if you intend to write series, reading series in that genre, studying the bestsellers, looking at the charts, looking at what books are doing well in different categories and all of that sort of thing, and having that understanding of tropes. Are cliffhangers acceptable in this genre? Is there a happily ever after like in romance expected, or can you get away with a happy for now? Can you get away with not solving a case at the end of the book? All those sorts of things are very connected to their specific genre. So I think the overall approach to writing a series is very different for each person, but I think it all starts with understanding your target market.
No, that's fantastic points there for sure. It does say in, I guess it's like the write-up or the description for the book, you know, you talk about the real reasons authors should consider writing a series. Are you able to share with us what some of those might be?
Yeah, sure. So I think in the book there might be like 7 or so, but I'll give you the like top 3. So I think a lot of us, like me originally, sort of fall into writing a series because it suits the genre, which is a great starting point to writing a series. But we don't necessarily interrogate the other sorts of benefits that there are. So for instance, promotional flexibility, and the fact that writing a series can be more lucrative. Now, I think it depends. Like, I always look at things through an indie lens. Obviously, if you're a traditionally published author, you have far less flexibility in terms of like you being able to put your books on sale, for instance. Whereas an indie author, if I'm releasing, say, for example, book 4 in a series, I can drop the price of book 1, book a load of promotion in for that, and try and get a whole new readership into that book for the launch of book 4 and sort of bring everybody in that way. Whereas if I was just writing standalones, that's a lot harder to do. Like, you can always do a price pulse or a promotion on a standalone, but you've not necessarily got that. I suppose you're not holding the reader's hand from that standalone to the next, whereas a series very much has a sort of funnel throughout it. And having books in a series allows you to take advantage of promotional strategies like that in a way that, say, standalones, you might not necessarily be able to have the same sort of results, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Another one I would say, which is more, I guess, on the mindset side of things. So this could be for indies, it could be for traditional authors, it could be for everybody. For me, what I've found really liberating and really refreshing about writing in a series is that you utilize the groundwork that you did in book 1 all throughout the series. And so when you're writing book 2, when you're writing book 3, you're not necessarily starting from scratch, and you don't have this sort of, overwhelming moment where you go, okay, I've got to build this world, I've got to create these characters, I've got to do everything in between all of that, and then write the actual book and create the plot and all of that sort of thing. So when you're writing a series, for me, when I get to books 2, 3, 4, there is this sort of element of relief. There is this sort of lack of pressure there because I don't have to come up with everything from scratch. And it's almost comforting returning to the same characters, returning to the same world. And I think, for me anyway, the later books in the series become a lot easier because I'm much more familiar with the world. I'm much more familiar with the characters. And even though the characters evolve and change over the series arc and all of that, it's still this sort of sense of I am utilizing everything that I had already created and building upon it and making it better and better and better, rather than having to start from scratch every time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I'm glad you said it, because like somewhere in the back of my mind, I'm sort of thinking, and this is more from me and my personal style of writing, and to write in a series, for me to even say, can you become bored, means maybe the writing's not great. So that was a bit silly, but
I don't think that's silly at all. I forget what the saying is, where it's like, if the writer's bored, the reader's bored. And I don't think I really agree with that, because the reader reads the book once. Maybe they love it so much and they reread it, but ultimately they read it once. Whereas the author, I mean, I don't know how many times I've read my book. You are going to get bored at a certain point. You are going to get frustrated, and I think that's quite natural. And I don't think that necessarily is a reflection on the quality of the book.
Yeah. I'm someone who gets, and I'm fortunate to have a lot of ideas, and I have to really ground myself not to run off with each one, because I know what I know what my processes are, and I know what I'm like. So it's that, and I've actually just finished a book one in a junior fiction series.
Oh,
And
amazing.
thank you. And I've sent it off to a publisher to have a read of, and I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, should I just get on with the next one? And then I'm like, but I have something, a horror film script I would really like to give a go, and I thought that's something completely different, and I feel like I would like to do that. And then I thought, just thinking about having to kind of go in that series, but for what you said about going back in it, I can't even say it, familiarization of the world and the characters is such a positive thing, and think that's great.
Yeah, me too. It's something I really enjoy about writing in a series, because I find I've just sort of bypassed this point recently, because I'm starting a brand new series, and you have, even though all of mine are set in the same overarching literary universe, each series has its own world and new characters and all of that. So I've had this sort of overwhelming couple of weeks where you've got your whiteboards, you've got your post-it notes everywhere, you've got your maps everywhere, and there's just so much information that you need to organize, process. You need to make sort of order out of chaos. And when it comes to the later books in the series, I do not miss that part of the process. So
Oh no, that's amazing. So you've obviously shared so much tips and wealth of knowledge already about series, but can you share with us a little bit more of tips for authors who are looking to get started writing in a series that they could possibly find in the book?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose the book sort of covers right from the very start to the end of finishing up your series. So it is a sort of complete experience. And the first thing that I start with is talking about planning your series. And I don't mean outlining by planning. I mean what we sort of touched on earlier when it comes to market research, knowing your genre, knowing the reader expectations, really having a wealth of knowledge about that particular genre and how a series might be structured in that genre. So, for instance, my epic fantasy books are a dynamic series. So the books are chronological. You can't start at book 3 if you haven't read book 1. You have to start at the very beginning and go all the way through. And that's a pretty common thing in fantasy series. Whereas a genre like crime or a genre like romance, they might be more interconnected standalones. So with a crime, the detective usually in each book has to solve a case. There might be an overarching case that goes across the whole series, but each book is usually its own case, and you have the 3-act structure with the resolution at the end before then maybe hooking into the next book. And similarly, romances will focus usually on one couple per book, and then at the end of that particular couple's book, you'll be introduced to a secondary character who then in the next book becomes a main character with their own romance. Obviously, I'm just sort of generalizing here, but you can see how and that is just my sort of brief understanding of these genres can inform my decision about what type of series I write and how to meet the reader's expectations in those genres. So yeah, I would say the big takeaway from the book, or one of the big takeaways, is the importance of doing that market research, learning your readers' expectations, and really understanding how those align with the series in that genre. And then I guess we've also already touched on this, but it's one I always come back to, is just thinking of your series as part of a long game strategy. And the wonderful thing about writing in a series is that, say the first book doesn't do as well as you think it will do, every time you release a book in that series after is a chance to almost relaunch that first book and breathe new life back into that series, which is a really, really cool benefit, I think, of writing a series. And that's part of what we were talking about before with the price promotion strategy and all that sort of stuff. So it really gives you a lot of opportunity to reach new people and to make sure that those books in the series find their target readers. So yeah, those are some of the bigger takeaways from the book.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. How to write a successful series is just, obviously, with all your success and the series that you've got, have you just, this book, has that always been in your mind that you thought you were going to write this, or it's just you keep getting asked the same questions, you've got a lot of information and a wealth of knowledge to share with others that you thought, hang on, I'm just going to do a nonfiction here and put it out?
Yeah, so I it's definitely not something that I had in mind when I started publishing book. It was definitely definitely a more recent thing. Like you said, I do get asked a lot of the same questions, but I also found that anytime I did share some of the lessons learned or anything like that on social media or in my newsletter, it really resonated with people. And I had a lot of authors then contact me and say, thank you for sharing that. I thought I was alone, or thank you for sharing that. I've changed my mindset and now I'm doing better, blah, blah, blah. And that sort of kickstarted the thought that I would like to write a nonfiction book. But originally this book started out as a much broader topic. And the topic, I think, was just generally long-term strategies for success for authors, something like that. I wrote the first draft as that version. And it wasn't really until I had a beta reader friend read it and she said, this is all about writing a series. And I was like, oh, no, I didn't realize that. But as soon as she told me, it was like all the pieces clicked into place for me. And I realized that it was about writing successful series, because that is how I've sort of, planned my career, that all the strategies that I used were to do with writing a series. And so as soon as I had that angle, then the rest of it just sort of came together, because it made a lot more sense. And it seems to have resonated with some people. So that's always really rewarding.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And can you see this one being the first in series of books for nonfiction for authors?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't not write a nonfiction series when I've talked about how great writing in a series are. I think it applies. I think it applies for nonfiction as well. And I've already got the outline for the follow-up book to this one done.
Wonderful.
So
yeah, that's amazing. So you obviously have these massive epic ideas as well. Do you think that you're always just going to write in a series, or do you think there'll be a few? Well, I suppose you can't foresee the future, but have you had any sort of standalone ideas, or they just keep going?
It's funny you should say that, because I've actually just committed to a project that involves me writing a standalone. But I will say that the idea I've got for this standalone then also fits into an idea of a series of interconnected standalones. So
yeah.
even my standalones can't just, hang out by themselves. They've got to be part of something. And I mean, I mentioned it before, all my books are part of the same literary universe. All my series have breadcrumbs throughout one to the other, so that that's part of one of the things I talk about in the book is sort of rewarding those long-term readers with things like breadcrumbs. So if they found you through your second series and then they go back to read your first series, they can see links and little clues from each. And it doesn't have to be these huge plot changing things. It's just you could mention a name here or a creature there that comes across both series, and those things are so rewarding for readers. And so I think that more than anything is probably a good idea of where my strategy lies. Like, I want everything to fit into an overall universe, and to be able to, for readers to be able to be rewarded when they come from one series to another, or if they read that standalone, then they can read a series about the secondary character in that. And it all sort of links together in this big fun way, hopefully.
Yeah, oh no, that's amazing. And I absolutely know what you're talking about from past people I've read as well. And it is when you get that realization, oh, it's that person, and you kind of feel like you're on the inside of some secret, or these people, or
exactly.
Oh no, I think that's great. Just quickly, do you have a schedule of works that you draw up for when you start a book to finish a book, or when you want the books to be released? How frequent do you release them?
So it's changed over time. When I released the Orameer Chronicles, which was my first series, I modeled my production schedule off a traditional publishing schedule. So I was only publishing one book a year. And as I've sort of gone throughout my career, my processes, I've learned a lot more about them. I've managed to streamline a lot of different elements of production. And so 2021, I released 2 books. And this year I will have released the last 2 books in my Curse of the Cyren Queen quartet, plus the nonfiction book. So 3 this year. But I generally do have a pretty long lead time in between, like knowing when I'm going to release a book and when it actually comes out. For example, I'm currently working on a new series starter that won't be coming out until next year. And as I said, I've got the outline for the next nonfiction done, and that won't be coming out for another year or more. So I do work quite far ahead of time. And it's just, for me, it's just a matter of knowing my own processes, knowing my own limitations, and making sure I put buffer amounts of time in case something goes wrong, like in case I get sick, in case an editor cancels. I generally have a pretty good idea of what's coming up and what I want to achieve in the year to come, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Yeah, no, it does. And how to write a successful series? Did you find that extremely easy to write because it's just pretty much pouring all your knowledge out in that format?
Yes and no. I found the sort of personal stories very easy to write because, like I said, it's got a lot of my personal experience in it. I talk very openly about mistakes I've made and lessons learned, but I also wanted to make sure that it was a very well-researched book. So throughout the book, there are numerous sources quoted. Like I said, I interviewed other authors. It's got a huge list of references at the back of the book. So I think that side of writing the book, I found a lot more stressful than writing fantasy because I had a responsibility to other authors to make sure that I was quoting them correctly and that they were comfortable with where they were being quoted. So I had to get permission for all of that. And also, you're sort of, while doing that, you're alerting people in the industry that you really admire and whose work that you've read and loved that you're doing this thing. Whereas fantasy, you can sort of fly under the radar a little bit. Like, you don't have to check in with industry experts about fantasy. Mm-hmm. Whereas, yeah, the nonfiction, I did find there was a little element of imposter syndrome that came with that because I don't claim to be an expert. It's more about sharing my experience. Yeah, there is this element of I'm really putting myself out here in terms of I'm sharing all this really like personal stuff about what I struggled with and didn't struggle with writing a series. So I suppose that's a really rambling answer to your
no,
question.
that's no, that was fantastic. And you know, even at this point in your career, to get that imposter syndrome, which I can absolutely relate, because you're kind of putting yourself up there saying, you know, not that you're an expert in the field, but yeah, you definitely know what you're talking about. But from all your degrees and your series writing, and you certainly are an expert. So, but yeah,
thank you.
that was thank you so much for sharing that. So, as I said, you've already shared so much, and you've got another follow-up to how to write a successful series. What else can we expect from Helen in the future? You've got the audiobooks out there. Do we know if there's going to be some TV series knocking at the doors?
Oh, I would love that. I don't know any author who wouldn't love that. I think that's probably a long way off if that ever does happen. But in terms of what I've got coming up, I am just about to wrap up my second series. So that's just about finished. I'm currently working on a brand new series in a new subgenre. So my previous two series are young adult epic fantasy, and this new series I'm moving more into epic romantic fantasy for adults. It's going to be a big series. So I'm currently working on the first book in that. I'm reworking it actually, and so that should hopefully be out in the first quarter of 2023. I've got a couple of things I can't talk about mid-year next year, but I'm hoping at the very least the first two books in the new series come out next year and the follow-up to the nonfiction book.
Oh, amazing, Helen. Well, so do we, and we can't wait to read all. And please, I honestly could talk your box off so many questions, but where can our listeners discover, you know, how to write a successful series and all of your series, your fantasy series, on and offline?
Yeah, sure. So my website is probably the best place to start. So that's just helenscheuerer.com. And if you're an author and you're looking for some free resources on how to write successful series, you can go to helenscheuerer.com/for authors. And that's a little sign up page where you can get a sample of my series Bible for Curse of the Cyren Queen. So that's the full 65-page document of me putting all the stuff together and, you know, making sure I'm consistent throughout the series. So you get like a proper look at what that might actually look like. And also, I think there's a successful series cheat sheet, and you get a volume of my author diaries, which I quote throughout the nonfiction book. So yeah, that's a good place to start if you're an author. And all my books, including fiction and nonfiction, are on Amazon. I think you can get them. The print books, you can get them mostly everywhere, and the ebooks are exclusive to Amazon. So yeah, and I'm on Instagram and TikTok and all the usual places.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your time and expertise, Helen. That was incredible.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
So there you have it, folks, the super successful series queen, Helen Scheuerer. And if you haven't read any of Helen's books, I suggest you get stuck into her amazingly addictive series. Next time on the Hybrid Author Podcast, we have Jodie J. Sperling from the Reluctant Book Marketer podcast talking to us about all things book marketing. So I wish you well on your author adventure this next week. That's it from me. Bye for now.
That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.